The music was too loud, and the chandelier above me kept swaying like it knew something I didn't. I stood near the wall with a half-full glass of something sweet I didn't order, watching people pretend they still liked each other after 20 years. Sequins, forced hugs, cheap laughter. The kind of reunion where everyone walks in thinking they've healed and walks out realizing they haven't. She hadn't seen me yet. Letha. She walked in 10 minutes ago, trailing glitter and nostalgia. Her dress was dark red, sharp, deliberate, meant to be remembered. She was alone. No ring. No hesitation. Just this calm, practiced confidence like she'd been preparing for this night while I'd been trying to forget it ever existed. And then it happened. She spotted him. It was like watching glass bend. Her whole body softened, eyes lit up like floodlights, and she crossed the room in seconds. No pause, no scan for me. Just him. And when she reached him, she didn't speak. She hugged him, full-bodied, fingers in his collar, cheek buried in his shoulder, like she was clinging to the last breath of a dream she didn't want to wake from. Like I hadn't existed. Like the years we spent, our apartment, our vows, our child, had been paper, and now someone had struck a match. She hugged him like I was a ghost. Nobody noticed me. I wasn't wearing my name tag. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I drove 6 hours just to see something I already feared. I don't know why I put myself in that room. I don't know what I thought I'd gain. Closure? Vindication? Some pathetic hope she'd look past him and find me standing there, silent and still, just like always? But what happened next didn't belong to any script I'd imagined. She pulled back from the hug, still smiling, and said something to him I couldn't hear. Then her face changed, just slightly, like a ripple across calm water. Her smile twitched. Her hand trembled. Then she dropped. No scream. No stumble. Just dropped. People gasped. Someone yelled for help. He knelt beside her, saying her name over and over. I didn't move. I couldn't. It felt like the whole room was spinning, but I was nailed to the floor. Her eyes were open. She was conscious. But her lips, they whispered something. And I swear to you, I read them. She said, he saw me. She didn't mean him. She meant me. And that's when everything split open. Not just the night, not just the past, but everything I thought was already over. I didn't go to her. I couldn't. Something in me cracked the moment she whispered those words. He saw me. Not what happened. Not help me, not Lowell. Just that. Like I was never supposed to be there. Like I had violated some secret timeline by existing in that moment. People say heartbreak is sharp. No, it's quiet. It's slow. It chews through you like acid under your skin. You don't scream. You just dissolve. The paramedics arrived quickly. A sea of people cleared to make space. I stayed hidden near the giant floral centerpiece, a coward behind lilies. I heard her name being repeated over and over. Letha, Letha, can you hear me? She responded faintly, then suddenly winced as if some invisible thread inside her had snapped. One medic turned to another and muttered something I couldn't hear. They placed her on a stretcher. Her eyes were open the whole time. And then they locked on me. For a full second, nothing moved. It was like we were the only two people in the room, and I swear to you, her pupils shrank. Her breath hitched. Not from illness, not from panic, but from pure, unmistakable dread. She hadn't just collapsed, she'd been caught. That second felt like an hour. I waited for her to say something. Anything. But she just turned her face away, like the sight of me physically hurt her. Like I was the thing she prayed would never show up. They wheeled her out under chandeliers and polished floors, past clinking glasses and forced sympathy. I stayed behind, stared at the place where she fell. He didn't leave with her. The man she hugged, the reason her knees gave out, was still there, laughing softly with another guy in a gray jacket. Calm, composed, almost smug. I watched him take a drink, check his phone, and pocket something quickly when someone approached him. I couldn't see what it was, but I felt my skin crawl. He looked up. Our eyes met. He raised his glass. It wasn't casual. It wasn't polite. It was a message, and I felt it land like a punch to the throat. You're too late. I left before dessert, got in my truck, and drove aimlessly for half an hour, hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My phone buzzed twice. Both from her. No voicemail. No message. Just missed calls. I didn't call back. What was there to say? By the time I got to the cheap motel I checked into last minute, I was shaking. I turned off the lights, lay on the stiff bed, stared at the ceiling fan. My brain screamed and whispered at the same time. I couldn't stop picturing her face when she saw him. The way she folded into his chest like a woman finally safe. I was never a violent man. I was never dramatic. But that night, I realized something I never wanted to believe, that love doesn't just fade. Sometimes it's buried. Sometimes it hides behind routines and carpool schedules and Netflix passwords. And sometimes it waits. Waits for the perfect moment to come back swinging, unapologetic and cruel. She didn't collapse from shock. She collapsed from fear. The kind of fear you feel when everything you've hidden behind your smile has just been exposed in the brightest room of your past. And I wasn't done. I didn't want to confront her. I wanted the truth to pull itself out like a thorn from her own mouth. I wanted her to bleed with it. Because I'd spent years being careful with her, tiptoeing around her cold moods, her long silences, her late nights. I thought I was keeping the peace. But peace built on lies is a cage, and I finally saw the bars. What I didn't know yet was how deep this ran. And who else already knew? I didn't sleep that night. Not even close. I just lay there in the cheap motel room, the flickering neon from the gas station sign outside pulsing across the walls like a metronome counting down to something I couldn't name. I kept replaying it, over and over. The way she looked at him. The way she collapsed. The whisper, he saw me. It wasn't just shame in her voice, it was exposure. Like someone who'd finally been yanked from behind the curtain mid-performance. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to drive home. Not yet. I needed answers, not silence. And I knew I wouldn't get the truth from her lips unless I pried it out. Around 9 a.m., my phone rang. Letha. I stared at the screen until it stopped. She didn't leave a voicemail. A few minutes later, a text arrived. Can we talk? Please. That was the first time she'd said please in months. But I didn't reply. Instead, I got dressed and drove straight to the hospital. The front desk was hesitant at first. Are you family? And I gave the only answer that still made sense. I'm her husband. The nurse softened and gave me the room number. She was awake when I walked in. The blinds were open, casting a narrow beam of light across the bed, and she was sitting upright, pale, hair a mess, but alert. She didn't look shocked to see me. She looked afraid, and that told me everything. Lowell, she whispered, her voice raspy. I was going to call again. You did, I said, shutting the door. I didn't answer. Silence. I pulled up the chair and sat. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't ask if she was okay. I didn't play husband. She fidgeted with her blanket. It wasn't what it looked like. I smiled, the kind of smile you make when something inside you finally dies. I didn't tell you what I thought it looked like. She flinched at that. Then tell me what it was, I said, leaning in. Tell me why you ran into his arms like he'd been the missing half of your soul. Tell me why your first instinct, lying on the floor, was to keep me from seeing it. Her mouth opened, then closed. She swallowed. I didn't expect him to be there. You didn't expect him? I laughed. Letha, you RSVP'd to that reunion 6 weeks ago. You bought a new dress. You said you'd stay the night with Mia. And now you're telling me it was a coincidence. She blinked fast. He reached out a few months ago. Just as friends. We hadn't talked since college. I didn't think it meant anything. I stood up. Paced. Didn't mean anything? She raised her voice, not in anger, but in desperation. Lowell, I was confused. I thought seeing him again might help me figure things out. I thought if I saw him and felt nothing, it would mean I was okay. Okay with what? Okay with us. She snapped. Okay with staying. With this life. With everything. I froze. So you needed to hug another man to decide if you wanted to stay married to me? I asked, voice low. Was that the test? Some emotional litmus strip to measure how much I mattered. Her eyes welled. You don't understand. I felt empty. Like something in me broke and never healed. And when he wrote to me, it brought things up. Things I didn't expect. You mean feelings, I said. You still have feelings for him. She didn't deny it. Didn't nod either. Just looked away. I turned toward the window, my fist trembling. And what was your plan if I hadn't shown up? Just disappear for the weekend and hope I never asked questions? No, she whispered. Yes. I don't know. And then she said the thing that broke me in a way even her hug couldn't. I wasn't going to sleep with him, Lowell. I just wanted to feel seen. The irony tasted like blood in my mouth. I had been seeing her every day. Through exhaustion, through silence, through arguments about dinner and money and our son's grades. I'd been watching her drown and didn't know how to reach her. And now she tells me she needed someone else to look at her like she existed? I left the room without a word. But I wasn't done. Because if she wasn't going to give me the whole truth, I'd find it myself. And I already had one place to start. That man, the one with the smug eyes and the lifted glass. He wasn't just an old flame. He was something else. And I was going to find out what. I didn't go home. I didn't go back to the motel either. I sat in my truck for nearly an hour, staring at the hospital entrance, trying to digest what she had said. I wasn't going to sleep with him. The worst part wasn't even the sentence itself. It was how she said it, as if what she did almost wasn't betrayal. As if emotional intimacy didn't count as long as she kept her legs crossed. I was done giving her the benefit of the doubt. I opened my glove box, pulled out the crumpled reunion program Letha had left on the passenger seat the night she drove to campus. She thought I hadn't seen it, but I had. I remembered one name listed among the committee organizers, Dr. Callum Rain. The same smug man who raised his glass to me like I was the pitiful punchline of someone else's joke. So I went looking for him. Campus was still buzzing with post-reunion activity. I walked through the halls like a stranger in a museum of my own life, but with one purpose now: find Callum. A student directed me toward the humanities building, 3rd floor. Said Dr. Rain had office hours that morning. And just like that, I was outside his door. It was open. Slightly. I could hear him talking on the phone, laughing low and confidently. The same voice I remembered from the ballroom, smooth, unhurried, entitled. I waited a beat, then knocked. He glanced up. "Oh, you must be Lowell." I wasn't surprised he knew my name. It confirmed what I already suspected. They'd talked about me. Recently. Frequently. "Yes," I said flatly. "Mind if we talk?" He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Of course. I was wondering when you'd show up." That smug tone. Like I was late to my own public humiliation. "I'm not here to fight," I said, sitting down. "I just want the truth." He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "I didn't touch her. If that's what you're asking." "I'm not asking about what you did," I replied. "I'm asking about what you planned." That made him pause. His smile didn't fade completely, but it faltered. "What do you think this is? Some conspiracy? I think you knew she was vulnerable. I think you reached out knowing what she was going through. I think you've been grooming her for months under the guise of nostalgia and unfinished conversations." He laughed, short and bitter. "You give me too much credit. Letha found me, Lowell. She messaged me. Said she'd seen an article I published. Said she remembered how passionate and unapologetic I used to be. Her words, not mine." I stared at him. "So you just picked up where you left off?" "No," he said, suddenly more serious. "We didn't have an affair. But we did talk. A lot. More than we probably should have. But don't act like I seduced her. She came to me with a heart already cracked." I felt my jaw tighten. "You encouraged her to come to the reunion." "I suggested it," he shrugged. "She said she needed clarity. I told her sometimes seeing a person again can settle unfinished feelings. Or stir them up." He wasn't even hiding it. He wanted me to know this wasn't random. That their encounter wasn't accidental. That I'd been erased from the equation long before I walked into that ballroom. "Why didn't you leave with her?" I asked. "Because she wasn't mine," he said calmly. "Not yet. Anyway." That was it. That one sentence. Not angry. Not defensive. Just honest. Coldly, brutally honest. I stood up. My chest felt hollow. "You think this is some kind of competition?" "No," Callum said, looking straight at me. "I think it already ended. You just didn't notice." I walked out before I did something stupid. Before I said something I couldn't pull back. But deep down, I knew he was right. The marriage I thought I had was already gone. Not last night. Not during the hug, but months ago. When the call started. When the secrets began. When I mistook distance for stress and silence for exhaustion. But I wasn't going to let them write the ending. Back in the truck, I opened Letha's text again. "Can we talk? Please." This time, I replied, "Not yet. But you'll want to soon." I didn't even know what that meant fully. Only that I was done reacting. Now it was her turn to answer. Because if she truly wanted to feel seen, I was going to show her exactly what I saw, and she wouldn't be able to look away. I didn't go home that day, either. I couldn't. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I was starting to realize that home didn't feel like home anymore. It hadn't in a while. The walls, the kitchen, our bed, they all felt like props on a stage where I'd been reading from the wrong script. And now that curtain was about to fall, whether I was ready or not. I parked in a grocery store lot 3 towns over, where nobody knew me. I locked the doors, turned off the engine, and sat in total silence. That silence, for the first time, wasn't peaceful. It buzzed. It gnawed. It wasn't until I opened my phone that it turned into something else entirely, something I could no longer ignore. Letha never logged out of her email on our shared tablet at home. I'd always respected that boundary. Never snooped. Never even felt the urge. I believed in trust. In giving space. But trust only works when both people are playing the same game, and Callum's smug grin told me we weren't. I opened her inbox, and it felt like someone cracked my chest open with a crowbar. There were emails. Dozens of them. Most from the past 2 months. Some labeled workshop notes or research follow-up, as if she'd actually tried to make them look professional. But the contents were anything but. They weren't graphic or explicit. No dirty photos. No admissions of love. What they were was worse. They were emotional confessions, deep, raw, painfully honest words that had never been spoken to me in our 12 years of marriage. Paragraphs about how she felt invisible, how her life had become small and silent, how she missed being someone's fire instead of someone's routine. And he fed it. He fed every insecurity with validation. Told her she was radiant, underrated, once in a generation. He called her muse. She signed one of her replies with, "Yours in ways I can't say out loud." My hands trembled as I scrolled. I should have stopped reading. I should have slammed the device shut, driven off, thrown it in a river. But I didn't. I kept reading. Because I had to know, how long had I been living next to someone who was no longer with me? There was one message that undid me. Sent a week before the reunion. Subject line, "What if I just didn't go back?" She wrote, "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to wake up in the life I meant to choose. Not the safe one. Not the stable one. The one that scared me, lit me up, made me reckless. You always made me reckless. And maybe that's who I really was before I gave it all up to become someone's wife. I'm not blaming him. He's good, kind, consistent. But maybe that's the problem. I don't want consistency anymore. I want risk. I want to feel like I'm standing on the edge again." And Callum's reply? "Then don't come back. Choose what sets you on fire." I shut the tablet. Not slammed shut. Gentle. Mechanical. Like my body was trying to protect itself from going into full collapse. And then I cried. Not loud, not messy. Just a silent stream that ran down both cheeks like something sacred leaving me for good. Because it wasn't just betrayal I'd read. It was erasure. I had been edited out of her internal story. Rewritten as a footnote. A placeholder. Something safe she once settled for before remembering who she really was. By the time the sun started to go down, I felt hollow. But also clear. She wasn't lost. She was choosing. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't confusion. It was a quiet, deliberate drift, the kind of betrayal that doesn't scream, doesn't shout, but poisons everything it touches while smiling. She was home by the time I finally walked through the front door. Sitting on the couch, arms wrapped around a throw pillow like it was armor. She stood up quickly when she saw me. "Lowell," she breathed, like saying my name might cast some spell. I didn't say anything. I walked past her, set the tablet on the coffee table, and sat across from her. Her face fell the second she saw it. "You went through my email." I nodded once. I did. Her lips parted like she was about to argue, then shut again. She looked down. "I never meant for it to go this far. You wrote him about not coming back." "I know. You said I was safe. That you missed being reckless. That I never lit you up." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was in a dark place. I didn't think." "You didn't think I'd read it. That I'd find out. That I still existed." My voice cracked at the end. "You didn't just break something, Letha. You built a new world behind my back. And you called it freedom." She covered her face with her hands. "I'm sorry. But sorry doesn't stitch skin back together once it's been torn wide open. Sorry doesn't give back the years you spent loving someone who was quietly slipping away." "I don't know what happens now," I said. "I really don't. But if you thought you were invisible before, I promise, I see you now. Fully. Clearly. And it hurts." She sobbed. Quietly. Into her sleeve. I stood up and headed toward the bedroom. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't slam doors. I just lay down on my side of the bed, still made from the night before, and stared at the ceiling until morning. Because you don't lose someone like that in one night. You lose them over time. And you don't even realize it's happening until you're the last one left in the room. The next morning felt too still, like the house itself knew what had been said and decided to hold its breath. I lay there long after the alarm buzzed and faded. Letha had already gotten up. I could hear her in the kitchen, opening and closing drawers, making coffee like we weren't living in the ruins of something that used to be sacred. Like she could just patch over this with routine. Like I could somehow forget the words she'd written, the life I meant to choose. I didn't speak to her that morning. Not out of spite, but because I was still bleeding from truths I hadn't fully processed. She glanced at me once while pouring her coffee, her mouth opening like she wanted to say something. But nothing came. Just a tight nod, and then she left for work without a word. The door closed, and I finally exhaled. I called in sick. There was no way I was walking into my classroom and pretending to care about dovetail joints or sanding technique when my life was peeling apart like untreated wood. I needed answers. Not from her this time. I knew those would come laced with guilt, revision, and half measures. So I made a list. I started with her mother. I'd always had a cordial relationship with Marilyn. She was one of those quiet, poised women who never gave too much of herself away. The type who smiled during tense dinners and changed topics when things got uncomfortable. We hadn't spoken much outside of holidays. But something told me she knew more than she let on. I called her. Lowell, she answered quickly, surprised. Hi, Marilyn. I'm sorry for calling like this. I just need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. A long pause. Go ahead, she said quietly. Did you know? I asked. About Letha and Callum. Did she ever say anything to you? About wanting to leave? About being unhappy? There was another pause, longer, heavier. Then she exhaled. She didn't have to say it out loud, Marilyn admitted. Mothers know when their daughters are drifting. My throat closed up. So, you suspected something. I more than suspected, she said. She started talking about him months ago. An old friend from college, someone who gets how I think that. I asked her once if she was being careful. She said I was overreacting. You never told me, I said. Why? Because she asked me not to, Marilyn replied. And because I hoped it would pass. I didn't want to meddle. Meddling. That's what the truth is called now. I thanked her stiffly and hung up. The next name on my list was Tessa. Letha's best friend since their sophomore year. Maid of honor at our wedding. Godmother to our son. And someone who hadn't returned my text in weeks. I didn't bother calling. I drove to her house. She lived 2 streets over. She opened the door like she'd seen a ghost. Lowell, she said slowly, stepping outside. Don't worry, I said. I'm not here to yell or accuse. I just want one answer. She folded her arms. Okay. How long? Her eyes darted down. She never told me the full story. But you knew. I knew she was talking to him again. I told her it was dangerous, but she kept saying it was innocent. That it made her feel alive. That you didn't notice her anymore. That last sentence punched me right in the gut. She said I didn't notice her? Tessa hesitated. You didn't see her withdrawing, Lowell. You were so stuck in your routines, in your carefulness, your predictability. And maybe you thought that was love. But she was starving for something she couldn't name. And when he showed up, she fed it, I finished for her. With secrets. With lies. Tessa nodded, reluctantly. I'm not defending her. I told her to stop. I told her this would burn everything down. But she kept chasing it. Like she needed to know if that fire was still inside her. And now? I asked. Now that everything's burning? She's scared, Tessa said. Not of you. Of herself. I didn't know what to say to that. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, trying to feel like a person again. Not a victim. Not a husband. Just a person. Before I left, Tessa said something that stuck with me. She wanted you to be angry, you know. That's why she didn't hide it better. That's why she let you find those messages. She needed something to snap her out of the numbness, even if it was destruction. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because deep down, I already suspected it. Letha didn't just fall into this. She invited it. Like someone loosening the threads of a sweater just to see how long it would take to unravel. And I was the one holding the yarn, trying to reknit something that had already been discarded. By the time I got back home, the sky had turned orange. I walked into the house and found her in the kitchen, slicing apples. Calm. Like nothing had happened. She looked at me and said, I think we should talk tonight. Everything. No more dodging. I nodded. But inside, I already knew this conversation wouldn't fix anything. Because now I wasn't just mourning what she did. I was mourning how many people had watched her do it and said nothing. We sat at the dining table that night like we were preparing for a funeral. Her wine glass sat untouched. The apple slices she'd cut earlier had browned on the plate between us, curling at the edges like they couldn't bear to be present either. The whole house was still not quiet, still. The kind of silence that clings to the walls after something irreversible has happened. Letha tucked her hair behind her ear the same way she used to when she was nervous in college, and for a moment, I hated how familiar it all still felt. She didn't start with, "I'm sorry." She started with, "I need to explain." I let her speak. "I don't know when it happened exactly," she said, her voice low, rehearsed. "But I started looking at my life like I had taken the wrong turn back in 2008 and just never corrected it. I thought that feeling would go away, that having Connor, building a life, finding a rhythm, that it would silence that voice. But it never did. It just got quieter. And then Callum messaged me. I didn't say anything. She went on. It felt like someone suddenly turned the volume back up on the part of me I'd buried. He remembered who I was before. Before dishes and daycare and budget spreadsheets and predictable Sunday dinners. He made me feel like I hadn't disappeared. Like I was still me. So what was I? I asked. My first words of the night. The obstacle? Her eyes filled instantly, but she didn't cry. No. You were the one who stayed. Who stayed even when I didn't deserve it. I didn't want her guilt. I wanted the truth. You were going to leave, I said. You were never just visiting the past. You were planning a future without me. She looked down. Yes. That one word landed heavier than a scream. And you weren't going to tell me? I asked. I didn't know how. I kept waiting for the moment to feel right. Then I kept hoping the moment wouldn't come. I pushed the plate aside. What were you hoping I'd do? Letha. Catch you at the edge and beg you to stay? Give you one final grand reason to choose me again? She didn't answer. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just a quiet understanding she had already left. Long before the emails. Long before the reunion. She had checked out, locked the door behind her, and left me dusting furniture in a house she no longer considered a home. I loved you, I said, barely above a whisper. I still do, somehow. And maybe that's the most pathetic part of all this. That I kept showing up. Even when you stopped seeing me. Her face crumpled. You were so good to me, Lowell. So kind. You gave me stability. You gave me peace. I didn't want peace anymore. You wanted chaos, I said. You wanted to burn the house down and feel the heat. She nodded. I just didn't know you'd throw me in the fire. She stood up suddenly, pacing now, her composure unraveling. Do you want me to beg? To fall on my knees and promise it meant nothing? Because I won't. Not because it doesn't hurt. It does. But because I won't lie again. I let it happen. I let myself believe there was another version of life out there where I could be whole again. I'm ashamed of how I went about it. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't feel real. And there it was. The final nail. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the woman sitting across from me wasn't cruel. She wasn't malicious. She was just done. And maybe that's worse. Maybe a clean betrayal would have been easier to hate. But this slow, aching death of something that once held joy? This was grief without a body to bury. I stood up. My legs felt heavier than they should. So what now? I don't know, she said. But I think we both deserve to stop pretending. I nodded slowly, then turned toward the hallway. I paused at the corner, looked back at her, and said, I saw the messages. All of them. Even the one where you asked him what it would feel like to wake up beside someone who made you reckless again. Her lip trembled. I hope it's worth it, I said. Because I spent years loving you the best way I knew how. And I hope someday, when the dust settles, you understand that stability wasn't your prison. It was your shelter. I walked down the hall and into the guest room. Closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the floor, wondering if maybe I'd always been a temporary stop in her life, a safe place to rest before chasing her next disaster. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. But I did decide. Tomorrow, I was going to see a lawyer. Not out of revenge, but because she gave me an autopsy. And it was time I finally buried what was left. The next morning was the first time in months I woke up without the dull ache of trying to fix something that refused to be fixed. I opened my eyes to a quiet room, sat up, and realized I had slept, really slept. No dreams, no tossing, no imagined conversations running through my mind like a film on repeat. Just breath and stillness, and the faint feeling that something had finally stopped. I didn't speak to Letha when I walked past the kitchen. She was already gone, probably to work, maybe to think, or maybe just to avoid facing the reality of the choices she had made. I didn't need to know anymore. The grief had peaked. Now came the clarity. I didn't go to a lawyer that day. Instead, I went to see Connor. He was staying at my sister's for the week, Letha's idea originally, to give us space, as if space could stitch trust back together. He ran to me when I arrived, wrapped his little arms around my waist like nothing had changed. And maybe to him, nothing had. He didn't need to know all the details. Not yet. He He just needed to see that I was there. Present. Still his father. Still his anchor. That night, I told my sister everything. She listened without interruption. And when I finished, she said, "You didn't lose. You just let go of something that was already gone. That takes strength most people don't have." I hadn't thought of it that way. For so long, I saw myself as the man being left behind. The stable one. The safe one. The one who wasn't exciting enough to be remembered. But maybe I was more than that. Maybe kindness, patience, and loyalty weren't weaknesses. Maybe they were superpowers in a world that glorifies chaos and craving. 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Not in anger. In peace. She didn't fight it. She moved out with quiet acceptance, and I stayed in the house. The guest room became my new space for a while, symbolic, I guess. I kept it simple. Clean sheets. A fresh coat of paint. I didn't want echoes anymore. I wanted air. It took time, but the weight lifted. I joined a local support group. Started teaching a weekend class in furniture restoration. Something about taking broken pieces and making them whole again spoke to me on a level I hadn't expected. It felt like therapy, sanding away the damage, reinforcing the core, giving forgotten things a second life. One evening, 6 months after the reunion, I stayed late after class. A woman named Rena, not to be confused with Letha, and believe me, I noticed the irony, asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime. She wasn't flashy. Just real. Warm smile. Soft voice. The kind of person who listens all the way through. I said yes. Not because I was ready to fall again, but because I was finally standing on my own. The past didn't disappear. I still remember the night she hugged him. The whisper. The betrayal. But I don't live there anymore. I don't sit in the wreckage wondering what I could have done differently. Because the truth is, I did what good men do. I loved with my whole heart. I showed up. I stayed. Even when I was being erased. And in the end, I walked out alive. Not broken, but rebuilt. Because sometimes, the best thing you can do when someone burns the life you shared is to rise from the ash and start building something that's yours, entirely, unapologetically yours.